Good evening, everyone. If you don't know me, I'm Rex Bennett. I'm the Education Director here at the museum. Thanks for coming out to the second official of our lecture series this year for 2024. And for those joining at home, I will be back again. We're going to do a question and answer session after we get all done, so we'll let Michael do his full presentation, hold questions until the end. Same for my folks at home that are Zooming with us tonight. And again, we appreciate everyone's support. None of this can be done without your financial support, your memberships, and just we appreciate that you appreciate us. So this is a great presentation, of course, as usual, from Michael. So I am going to turn this over to him, let him tell you about the Aurora Safety Car and its status as of right now. So take it away, Michael.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Rex. For those who don't know me, my name is Michael Hüby. I'm a member of the restoration team here at Lane Motor Museum. And Jeff Lane trusted me with the lead technician side on this restoration of our 1957 Aurora Safety Sedan, which the full title is. I want to, before we go into a couple of details, I want to first talk about the general direction that we normally take our restorations and how we approach them. Especially when it comes to unique cars like the Aurora. When you have a mass-produced car, it is often very easy to know how it rolled out of the factory, even if it's 60, 70 years ago. You look at a build sheet maybe, you look at a chassis plate, you look at VIN numbers, there's documentation. You know, there's plenty of pictures that you now can find on the internet of similar examples. So it's not very easy, but it's way easier than if you have a one-of-one like this one. And what happens to those cars over the years is they go through several hands, people start modifying them, people start adding their own flavor to them. And the first slide for tonight is the car as it came to the museum. When you compare to the picture that you see later of how it was in 1957 when it first was presented, it looks similar, but there's a lot of details that have been changed over the years, and so it took a lot of detective work to get it back, or we are planning to get it back to the state that it was in when it was first introduced. And my first example of a similar fate is that car, the Hirohata Merc. It's probably one of the most recognizable customs ever made. It was made in the Barris workshop, and it just recently sold for like $2 million. And it looks today again like it looked when Barris built it first. But in between then the first build and this restoration, the car went through like 3 different colors, interiors, in different ownerships. The general shape was never changed, but many details were changed. So when the car was then in the end restored, basically everything had to be revised and repainted, reupholstered. Anything had changed on the car. And a similar thing happened to our car. This is the car in around 1969, 1970. As you can see, it's got a teal color. This is unfortunately the only copy of a copy of a copy of a photo that we have of that time. And it's got a red interior, red and white vinyl, and teal with a black stripe on the side. And the owner at that time was completely convinced that this car never looked different. He wrote to the previous owner of the car that he knew this car from day one, and it always was teal. It never had a different color. And if there was another one with a different color, it must have been another car, which we, of course, know is not possible because there's only this one here. But it's one of those things like the Mandela effect, you know, where all of a sudden people think they know exactly the facts and they believe it with all of their heart. And This is the state that the last owner, Andy Saunders, built it into. And like I said, it looks almost like the original, but he changed a lot. He changed the roof structure, he changed the interior completely. He made new windshields because the old ones were faded and fogged. They were epoxy cast windshields, and so over time they deteriorated. Unfortunately, when he did that, he took all the original roof structure off with all the chrome trim, with the gull wing doors that the car originally had, and got rid of it. Everything was gone. So this is how the car was found. And as you can see, it's still all there. All the chrome trim, the gull wing doors, the original windshields, everything is there. But unfortunately, in the process of him customizing the car for himself, like the previous owners of the Hirohata coupe have done, he just gave it his own flavor and got rid of the things that he deemed no longer needed. So that, of course, poses a problem for us now, because all these intricate chrome pieces that you can see on here on all the pillars, those are all ribbed aluminum, bent into shape and then fastened on the roof structure. Gone. So we had to recreate those. The ones that you see on the car now are our reproductions that we made to measure, after measuring the pictures, after measuring any kind of angle that we had on the car. We assume that he used the banding that is on diner tables and bar stools, you know, that ribbed aluminum banding, because his roof structure was made from wood. Like most of the underpinnings of the car, he made out of wood because it was just a prototype, and he thought later in production we replace all that with full fiberglass and full steel structures and all that. So the diner table stuff fits very good into the wooden category, because you just route a slot into the wood and then you can hammer that stuff in. It's got a little retainer on the backside, and it just clicks into place then. Of course, we went a different route with this. He planned on having a steel roll cage because it was a safety car. So the whole roof structure was laid out as a roll cage and would provide more safety in case of a rollover. Of course, he didn't have that. He had that only in his catalog, in the pamphlet that he was giving out when he presented the car. So we approached it in a way that he wanted to do that. It's better for the car. It's structurally better to hang everything off and drive down the road. And so we went with a steel structure on the car. And sometimes when you have a historic significant car, you have to then, and it has gone through changes over time, you have to nail down the moment in time that you want to restore it to. You have to say, okay, this is the most important part in the car's life. This is the moment where it was shining. In this case, it shone and it was defeated at the same time, because the presentation in New York in 1957, where this photo was taken, was pretty much a disaster for the car, because he broke down 15 times on the way to the presentation and came in, I don't know, 4 hours, 8 hours late. And the whole press was gone. Everybody went home because he didn't show up. And so his big presentation fell flat on its face. But he still managed to gather a couple of people for a press photo. And there was a picture in the New York Times, I think, that was came out the next day with a small write-up, but it wasn't the front page news that he thought he would get. So we decided that this was the moment of the car that really defined it. And so we looked at this picture, and a couple of things stood out that we have seen in other pictures that the car didn't have before. One of them being a white interior. It's a white tuck and roll vinyl interior. And you can faintly see it. It's got black binding on the seats. Also, he changed the hubcaps out. On a previous iteration of the car, this one, you can see the hubcaps are different. These are 1952 Lincoln. And then when he presented the car, these are 1950 Cadillac, the sombreros, which were really popular with hot rodders at that time. So we said, okay, this is what we need. But since we didn't have any interior pieces and nothing original, we had to start researching how it looked in detail. And all right, so this is the first interior that we found. It's got 4 bucket seats, but they're straight backed, and it's all more a grayish color. It's hard to tell. Then this is from the presentation in New York. You can clearly see the white binding on the seats, and they're more rounded. This is the interior how it was in the teal car. It's still the same seats, but they're now red and white instead of black and white. And these are the seats that the car had in it when it came to us. They're still the same buckets, but the side pieces here have been cut off. And of course, they've been upholstered in completely different vinyl and fabric mix. Same for the door panels. The door panels were completely different. So we had to find more details on the white interior to know where this should go. Which then you go on the internet and you start just search, Aurora Safety Car and all kinds of combinations, and you click through millions and millions of pages. And I came across a magazine article that I haven't seen before. And it was a really small picture on the internet, and you could hardly read anything. But at the bottom, which is unfortunately cut off, it said page 16 and page 17 and the name Caper, which didn't say anything to me at that time. And I could barely make out the photographer name, Kurt Gunter, which, if anyone is into the Beatles, might know that he photographed the 1964 American tour of the Beatles as well. So he's the guy that took these pictures. And the one I was after was this one here. This is Father Juliano, the builder of the car, and he's sitting on what looks like those seats that we need. And here's a better resolution of it. And it just gave us great detail on, you can count the pleats, which for me is important that we get that right. And you can see how the front of the seat looks, and the base, and the piping, everything. Also, this is one of the seat buckets. It's a fiberglass bucket, and it's got a seam in the middle. Now, when I took the upholstery off the original seats that were in the car, they had a seam in the middle, and I was like, damn, did they cut them, made them smaller, whatever? They already chopped off the side pieces, so maybe they modified them any further. This confirmed that it was original. And then it occurred to me, it is a 2-piece form, a mold, a fiberglass mold, because the seat sides curl over so that you can roll the fabric around it and fasten it. And you couldn't get it out of the mold if it would be in a 1-piece mold. So it was a 2-piece mold, and then they glued the 2 pieces together in the middle, and that gives that seam here. So first problem solved, one of 5 million probably. But now we know what to do. Now we have the right materials collected, and very soon the upholstery of the seats will begin. Caper, by the way, if anyone wonders what the magazine is, it's a, let's say, a gentleman's magazine, similar like Playboy. It was from the mid-50s into the late 60s, I think, but it was never as popular as Playboy, but it had a similar makeup. So for a few weeks, my search history on Google, because I had to find the magazine, and I didn't know what year, what issue it was, so I went on eBay and just clicked through every single Caper magazine that I could find, and then looked at the index if it was scanned. And in antique bookshops, when they had an online representation, they sometimes had some, and they had the index of the magazine printed as the first picture, and I would go through the page numbers, and I knew page 16, page 17, and then in 1959 issue June, voila. I'm glad it wasn't the issue with Betty Page on it, because that would have been like a $300 magazine. This was only $7, so we were good.
Because of the interesting articles.
Sorry?
Because of all the interesting articles.
Yes, oh yeah, no, they had really good articles. Absolutely, like highly intellectual, and I'm not joking. So after that was done, my next focus was the roof frame. As I said, the previous owner had replaced the wooden structure that was totally deteriorated with a steel frame, which he then made from stainless steel and just polished it. But it didn't have the right shape. It was very asymmetrical. It was all crooked. Oh, sorry. There's too many buttons on this remote. The longitudinal beams, he made the classical mistake. If you span a long distance on a frame and you use a flat piece, when you stand away from the car, it looks like it's caved in. So they were completely flat. I put a straight edge on it. They were absolutely even. But when you stepped away from the car, it looked like someone has sit on the roof. It was all caved in. And the rear hoop didn't have the right shape. It was way too curvy here, and it was way too flat on the other side. It barely matched the car in the overall dimensions, so we had no choice but take it all out and start all over again. And I was able to use my new toy that I had just gotten at that time, a scanner, a big 3D scanner that enables me to scan complete cars. And so I scanned the existing structure to have the opening of the passenger compartment, which is also not symmetrical. It's a hand-built car. And the rough position of the ABC pillars. And then I went to work on SolidWorks and drew a new frame in segments onto the scan, and then had the individual parts lasered out, because none of this is straight. They all have multiple bends in them. This one bends forward, then it bends inwards, outwards. So it would be almost impossible to bend them on a bending machine. You would have a lot of losses there, because you would try and don't get it right. So basically it's a 4-piece construction: front piece, top piece, back piece, lower piece. And then you weld them, you stitch weld them together. Later, if you want to have a look, you can see where they're stitch welded together here. And that gives them the perfect shape and dimension that I want, evenly symmetrical on both sides. And I don't have to spend hours on a bender with angles and everything. So after that was done, I started working on the windshields. And this is the moment where we are now. This piece of foam that you see in front of you is the actual mold plug to make a new mold to cast a new epoxy windshield. And because we're not able to route it out of a big solid block because the routing machine we use doesn't have that capability in that dimension, we split it into easy workable pieces that are then glued together to make the complete windshield. And then this is the outer mold plug. And the same goes for the inner mold plug, because we need a two-part mold that then has a 3/8 gap in which we pour the epoxy resin, let it cure, and then spend the next 3-4 weeks cussing and polishing and sanding. But as you can see, there's still a couple of pieces missing. We have them machined here down the road at Nashville Plastics. They have a big router table, but it can only do 6 inches thick because of the machine travel. But this will be covered in fiberglass and then gel coat, and then onto this we make the mold. So this is basically the negative for the mold as for the outside mold, and this is the negative for the inside mold. So it's all upside down. And the rear window, which you can see we already made a casting from a mold that we got with the car. When the previous owner restored the car, he took molds off the original windshield and rear screen, but they were badly damaged, and he didn't take out the imperfections. So later, when just go by, have a look and try to look in or out of the car, it's like a funhouse mirror. You get a headache immediately because it's just wavy and distorted. And so we can't have that. And the rear screen has a slightly easier shape. So we have that made by a plexiglass aircraft window maker. And this shape, they said, yeah, no problem, absolutely. Then I sent them the model for the front one, and they're like, yeah, now you're on your own on this one. We can't do this. I mean, they don't do anything else but windshields, but they were like, no, can't do that one, just because of the extreme shape. But on the rear one, I used the scan to verify that my new windshield fits into the opening on the car by lowering it onto the scan, and you can then follow the contour and you see exactly if it fits or not. Because there's no second chances once the thing is made, and the tooling cost is pretty high. So yeah, that's about 50% of the window problems. The rest, which is the plexi for the gull wings and for the skylight, they are being made here at Nashville Plastics because they're flat pieces. They have a big pizza oven that they can heat up acrylic and then shape these pieces accordingly. Then it's on me to make the metal frames to frame those gull wings in, come up with a mechanism to lock them actually on the car so they are like a beagle in full run, you know, when you're driving down the road, which is another problem on this car because, as you can see, it doesn't have any door handles. So he had starter solenoids as solenoids to pull the door mechanisms open, and but only for the doors, not for the gull wings. And you have to open the gull wing before you can open the door. So we're still working on that problem. Yeah, and so this is the state of things as we are right now with our Aurora. I just got news that I have about another 8 months to finish the project, because the car is supposed to go to Amelia Island early March next year. So wish me luck.
My question is there a reason why you're staying with the epoxy? Is it to be true to the original, or the snapshot when you're trying to restore it to?
No. The epoxy is partly because it's original, but partly also because it's not possible to do it in acrylic. This deep undercut here, if you just imagine you take a piece of fabric and you would lay it over that shape, it would bunch up on the corners and you would have to pull really hard to get it to lay flat. And with acrylic, there's only so much you can pull. That's why the aircraft people said, not us, you know. They said it's almost impossible, or they wouldn't know how to do it in acrylic.
There was a guy who came to the museum about 2 weeks ago and told me that he had seen this car in England, and it was painted by a man in England, a friend of his. Mm-hmm. Is that's
the
where
previous,
the car came from to you?
Yes. That's the previous owner was in England, or is still in England, and that's why he had seen it there. It was restored in the late 90s, early 2000s, and stayed in England until we got it.
What's the drivetrain?
What's the
drivetrain engine?
Oh, yeah, chassis, and the complete chassis is from a 54 Buick Special. So engine, Dynaflow, transmission, rear axle, frame, everything. That's the easy part. It really is. And that was the part that he left untouched when he restored the car or customized the car. The only thing that he altered was the color of the engine, so we bring it back to the original Buick paint and decals and everything to make it look like a 54 Buick engine. But the chassis is all 54 Buick.
Rex?
Oh.
I have a question from Zoom. What is the body made of, and what work did you have to do to it to restore it to get it to the condition it is now?
Yeah, oh, that's a good question. Well, the body is made from fiberglass, which of course, and he started on the car in about 1955, as far as we know. He finished in 57, but in 1955, fiberglass was like the material. It's like carbon fiber today. It was like space age, rocket science material. And so he made a wooden buck and shaped the body over that wooden buck in fiberglass. The substructure was wood in the original car, so all the internal panels, every reinforcement inside the firewall, the rear firewall, everything was wood. But by the time it got to Andy Saunders, the material was the wood was just rotted away. So he went and replaced all the wood with fiberglass bulkheads and reinforcements, which it is not original, but it's one of those painful decisions that you have to make. It's like, are you going to completely original back? Well, then we are at a wooden frame again, or wooden internals that don't hold up and will vibrate and split when you drive down the road, and over time will hurt the car more than they are good. So in this case, we're going with what works long-term for the car. It is not seen anyways. It's one of those things that once it's painted, you don't know what material it is, and it will preserve the car for future generations and for actual use for a long time. Okay.
Any more questions?
Do we have more questions? So hold on, she's coming over with the microphone.
Any fire or melting risk if you park in the sun from the rear view mirror, or from the rear windshield, excuse me?
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing to be seen. The whole thing is like a big glass house. So in this climate here, if you are in the summer outside and you have all the windows closed, I don't know what the internal temperatures will be, but it won't be low. He actually planned to have a AC in the car. So there's a picture where you can see the rear parcel shelf, and it's got some cutouts. First I thought, speakers? No, can't be, not at that time, not in 1957. You wouldn't have like big stereo speakers in the back. And then it dawned on me, AC. Because back then the first ACs that came out, they were trunk ACs that blew the air into the car. And they had these grills as air intakes. And then some cars had like transparent ducting going into the pillars. And then the air came out over the drivers and passengers. But you could see the tubing running in the back of the windshield, the rear screen. And so he was planning on putting an AC in it so that it would be somewhat bearable. And also he wrote in one of the things that it would have retractable shades, like in the skylight and in the doors, but they were never fitted. It was all catalog wear, you know, it was all like, yeah, this car will do this and this car will do that, but it never was actually done.
Another question from Zoom. What is the quality of the body of the body itself? Is it right, left symmetric? Did he do a good job with the body work?
He did a very good job. There's a photo that we have where he's in the process of making the wooden buck. And it's like you would think, it's like a wood slat every 5 inches from front to back, full scale. And he had a gantry over it to pick up points on the left side and then mirror them over to the right side, like you do that in a modern design studio still. And he apprenticed or he did an internship at GM in the design studios of GM because he was planning on becoming a car designer until his parents said, no, you will become a priest. And he was like, yes, sir, and became a priest. But he never could shake wanting to build a car. So he was pretty well trained, you can see that. And the car is fairly symmetrical. There's little inconsistencies, but you have that in almost any car, even up until a few years back when they started to make the models on a CNC router where they really one-to-one mirror left to right. But normally you always have inconsistencies. And by that standard, it's really well made. The finish, the overall finish of the body is pretty good.
Are any of the family members still around, and are they watching what you're doing with their creation?
We had someone come by who was a youngster, like 16 or something like that, when the car was built. So he knew the people that were involved in building the car. But just by virtue of the age of the car, there's no one that we know that was actually on this. And with Father Juliano being a priest, there's no family. So no, unfortunately, no. It would be great. I mean, that would be really great. There's one person we know that had some memory of the car, but that's about it. Thank you.
One more.
Is there any truth to the rumor I heard that this priest took the church's money to make this car and they were not aware of that?
Yeah, that's a rumor. Yeah. When I did the research for the car, we have plenty of news articles and eyewitness accounts, although sometimes eyewitness accounts are not very helpful. See the teal car. I'm convinced this was the only one and was always teal. But the rumor that he took the money, the FBI investigated him because of those rumors, and they could never find anything, and there was never any proof. But the rumor alone was apparently too much for the church, so they kicked him out when the whole thing went down, and that was that. But the rumor persisted. Yes, thank you. Okay, it looks like we have all questions answered. All right, then I want to thank you again in the name of Lane Motor Museum for coming. Thank you. And like I said, before you get home, look through the window if you want to get sick. It's amazing how the articles they were quoting that the visual through the windshields wasn't too great. They said, okay, it's distorted, but I don't think it was that distorted. When you see the pictures when the car was freshly built, it was a little distorted, but it was better than this. So and we have to do better than that too. So. Oh, okay.
Everyone is always interested in the effort that is required. So how many quote unquote hours will be put into this car to get it to where it needs to be?
That we don't keep track of our hours because we have a deadline, so it will take at least another 8 months. And sometimes we hop onto other jobs in between and come back, but it will be significant time that will go into this. I mean, between the modeling for these things, and the research, and then making it all, it will be very significant time. Yeah. So, but I have no number for you. Sorry. All right, then. Thank you for coming, and have a good evening.